Andover in Somalia, dust, heat, noise and camels. So why did we go to Somalia? Well, in 1991, the Somali dictator who was in charge was overthrown by a couple of warlords, and everything turned, I guess, a little bit pear-shaped. The two most powerful warlords, they then started fighting amongst themselves, and it caused a huge humanitarian situation. They estimate up to 4.5 million people were close to starvation. So the United Nations felt it really had to act. So it created what was called UNISOM 1, United Nations Operation Somalia in '92. However, the environment was too hostile for it to succeed. So they're trying to deliver aid, but the convoys were being attacked and the environment just wouldn't work, which is why they created UNITAF, or the United Task Force. Now, UNITAF was its principal goal, as you can see there, was to create a secure environment. So it was to enable the humanitarian aid to be delivered, and very much focused on looking after the people. It wasn't there to get into combat or to take control. It was there purely to secure the humanitarian aid. Now, it was US-led and UN sanctioned, so what that means, it wasn't a United Nations mission as such, it was a United Nations sanctioned mission. So the United States led it, and it contributed by a number of countries, such as New Zealand. Now, when it comes to UN missions, I'm not sure how many of you would be aware, but when something occurs or blows up around the world and the UN says it wants a mission, it then goes out to United Nations countries and says, what can you offer? You know, what can you provide? And each country will come back and either some may say we're not in a position to provide anything, others may give a range of options. Included in the options that New Zealand offered for UNITAF was to deploy 3 Andovers over to Somalia. And we also sent over a number of army personnel who helped with the logistics, moving freight to and from the port as well, and they were located on the airfield separate to us. I think we also offered a HERC as another option. So the UN gets all these options from around different countries and says, right, what do we need? Yep, we've already got HERCs, so we don't need this. Oh, the Andover, it's about half the size of a HERC. So for those missions that you don't want to use a full HERC for, the Andover would be perfect. So yep, we'll take those 3 of those. So our offer was accepted. We were put on notice to move in mid-December. So, and it all happened incredibly quickly. So, and then I think we found out probably, are we going tomorrow? No. Are we going tomorrow? No. And then found out, I think a couple of days before New Year's, that we were going to be leaving on the 1st of January. So, obviously it was quite a quiet New Year's. That's a little bit of humour. I'll try and put a little bit of humour in there. You may not get it, because it does. So I'm just going to talk about the trip to get there. So wait for it to load. So day 1, Whenuapai to Brisbane for a refuel, and then on to Townsville. So they were quite long days. So that one there, for example, purely flying was over 9 hours, and you think you've got to do your pre-flight planning. When you turn up the airport, might be an hour or so beforehand, and then when you stop for your refuel, might be an hour and a half or so on the ground. So that was day 1. Day 2, Townsville to Darwin. So Darwin, 5.2 hours for a refuel, and then on to Surabaya in Indonesia. So one thing about the flight going into Surabaya, 1.8 hours of it was at night time and thunderstorms. First time going into the airfield ever, and I remember you would be in at night in cloud. We had a small, very rudimentary weather radar to try and avoid the red blotches, which was the centre of the thunderstorm. So you're navigating your way around them in airspace, and we had to do an instrument landing approach in monsoon weather into there after what was an incredibly long day. And it's, I don't know, in life we have these moments and these days that we don't remember anything about, and then other moments and days that are as clear as though we were there yesterday. And I still remember the vivid memories. Even when we were landing and taxiing, I still remember as we were taxiing in, there was a wee Indonesian chap with his hat on fishing in the canals beside the taxiway, something you don't really get much here in New Zealand. Yeah. So day 3 was Surabaya to Singapore for a refuel into Butterworth. Now with Singapore, any of you that have been through Singapore, just apologies, just slowing down a little bit here. Yep, I'll go back. Oh, you're seeing ahead. What? Yeah. Now I'll just talk about it because it's sat down a bit. So we went to Changi for in Singapore for a refuel, and when you're a military aircraft, you go to the military hard stand. You don't get to go into the and get your duty free. There's none of that. No sitting there in air conditioned comfort. Just on the airfield, they come out, they refuel, and then you're off again. And then we went up to Penang. The accommodation in Penang wasn't that great, and we'd had a long day. So the lead, John Duxfield, made the call that we would actually, instead of staying on camp in Butterworth, we went over to Penang and to a bit more, I guess, air-conditioned accommodation for the flight the next day. The next day we went from Butterworth to Colombo to the Maldives. And I might actually just restart this, if you bear with me. Just because there's lots of really interesting stuff on here that I don't want you to miss. But one thing that I'll talk about with respect to Colombo in Sri Lanka, we needed to pay a departure tax, which is something that, they wanted $500 US cash per aircraft for the departure tax. Now, when you're flying overseas, you do carry an imprest, so we had 10,000 US, so it was lucky that they didn't actually know that we had 10,000 US dollars on us. I did ask for a receipt. I thought that was, but they didn't find that very funny. And they said no receipt. So then, because they were armed and had weapons, I decided not to push it. Right, we'll see if we can get back to where we were. So we've just gone from... There we go. Right, so Butterworth, Colombo to the Maldives. Oh, even the animation's now working, eh? Do you know how long that took me? Do you know how long it took me to actually get that to work? And finally, I'm glad that you actually get the beauty and the joy of seeing the beautiful Andover flying. Now imagine that for the previous trip. So yeah, as I said, we arrived in Colombo and didn't do that. And then it was interesting going from Colombo with armed guards and then into the Maldives. Now the Maldives, I can't afford personally to go on holiday to the Maldives. If any of you that have, that's wonderful. But the interesting thing, it's a bunch of islands. The longest, thinnest island just happens to be the runway. So we landed on the longest, thinnest island after 2 hours over the ocean, and then you would pass through customs. Then you would jump in a boat and go to your hotel, which was on a different island. Now a lot of this. It was mentioned to me by my partner who thought, oh, this sounds like a great holiday kind of trip, but actually you're arriving there after a long day late. All you want to do is get your head down because you've got to be up early the next morning to do your flight planning for the next day. And so day 5 was Maldives to the Seychelles, and that was just pretty much 6 hours over water, and there was 3 aircraft, so we would take off about half an hour apart for each, and then we had a day off in the Seychelles, which was actually quite nice. It was and quite different from the following day, so that's why it jumps from day 5. I didn't put up any pictures of day 6, in the Seychelles. I did actually get a bit of tummy trouble because the bottled water, I didn't realise that, because you wouldn't drink the local water, was actually they'd refilled old bottles, but you live and learn. Yeah. And then day 7 was the Seychelles, 4.1 hours into Mogadishu. And when we flew into Mogadishu, it was actually the only time in the whole deployment that it was actually raining and there was cloud, and we had to shoot an instrument approach. So in the 3 odd months that we were there was never any other bad weather. But the first time we're going in, of course, it had to be that we had to shoot an approach. So we landed we went from flying or lying in the sand on the beach one day, and then straight after we landed, there we were filling sandbags to put around our tents to protect us from any enemy fire. So here is the airfield at Mogadishu. We were based just up at the far end of the airfield here, and this is a 10,000 foot long runway. So the Andover probably needs about that much to actually land in. So sometimes what we would actually do is fly along in ground effect. Now ground effect is where you're not actually touched down, but you're just almost floating along the runway. You haven't quite closed the engines, and you would go in ground effect and then shut down, land, touch down about here, and then turn off into the camp. One thing as well about with the camp, whenever we got airborne and departed, we would always turn straight away over the ocean because of the risk of small arms fire. Now our camp was located, and you'll see some images before, it was surrounded by razor wire, our small camp, with inside the whole perimeter of the airfield, which was all guarded by US Marines. We arrived on the 1st of January. On the 9th of December, just a month before, approximately 25,000 Marines, the UNITAF force, had started to go in to secure the environment. I don't know if some of you remember, I remember vividly it was one of the most filmed, because here was CNN, I think, on the beaches in Somalia as you actually watched the US forces actually landing for the first time, which was quite incredible. But yeah, so for us, automatically you can see Andover airborne here over the tents. You can see the sandbags, and we've got some video of that as well. Automatically you do a turn almost as soon as you got airborne. So this is the camp here. So the airfield is right behind us. My accommodation was here. You had the main mess tent here. This was some hard stand, and as you'll soon see, the Andovers were located just over to the right. So this was filmed by ground pooling. So hopefully the video will work. The sound's not great. I've tried to put up as much as I can, but what you will hear is just the noise and the dust, which is pretty much continuous. He's just saying what I said. So now he's going to turn around, and you'll see the Andover on the hard stand. One of the aircraft, two of the aircraft would have been airborne at the time. So this was our hard stand area here, and we shared it with Transals and G222s, which were twin-engined high-wing aircraft, look a little bit like mini Hercules. Now, the next wee video clip is, it was hot, so I'm just in a pair of shorts, so I apologise for that. And it's just, this was from a video that I sent home to Mum and Dad, 30 odd years ago now. So your dress sense was a bit different. But when there was the threat level on the airfield, a lot of the time was quite low. Actually it was always high, but because of the Cobra gunships that were there, because of the US Marines, there was very little attacks on the airfield at all, because they knew if there was any, there were Cobra gunships that were hovering around to protect the force, so it wouldn't look good on your resume if you did try and attack the airfield. So this is the gun pit here. So we do shifts of about 2 hours, and those. And then we had the signpost home, and I'm pointing out this because you'll see at the top, I make sure that Matt Hill, who was the navigator filming, he got the sign of Christchurch and Brindwa, which is where Mum and Dad lived, because I thought that was very, very important when you're sending something home to your folks. Yep. And the Kiwi on top, so everyone knew where we were. Yep. And guess which country's over the other side of the airfield? Sorry, I'm making them really hone in on Christchurch and Brindwa in the distance. You've got to keep your parents happy. And it is interesting for parents, obviously, with their children sent away to the other far side to dangerous environments. And they're UTF Somalia, so United Task Force Somalia. Yeah, and obviously windy, so the flags we didn't fare too well. But just you can hear the constant noise. It's not up full volume, and these are the sandbags I talked about. So we would put these, when we arrived, we put sandbags up to that level around all of our tents. And that was so that when we were sleeping, if any small arms fire did come in, while you're asleep, it would hopefully be stopped by the sandbags. Something that you don't do too often. And as I said, now this next, not a flattering picture, but this, probably 2 o'clock in the morning. This was the gun pit, so it'd all be rostered on, and you just get waken up to do your 2-hour stint on the gun pit at night. The Styres, and they had only recently been introduced into the military back in '93, so they were quite a new weapon. Constantly having to clean them because of the dust, and also you may not notice, but there's actually a dust cap. Now the dust cap was permanently left on, and if you did have to use it in anger, then you would just fire straight through it. Luckily I never had to use it in anger. Just some of the surrounds of the camp. So this was the camp mode area where we would eat outside. Obviously Steinlager had sponsored us with a few umbrellas, and that was the mess tent there. The side of the tent there, just counting the days off, but you can just see how everything is just covered in dust. Yeah, just everywhere. This next photo was actually taken with the Boeing arriving to take us home. Notice some of you, the ex-services, will recognise these, what are called gonophones, basically for men to be able to do number ones. Pretty much. They just go straight into the sand. So pretty rudimentary, but worked. Now, one thing as well was how to keep them clean in such a dusty environment. So I'll play this video. This here, I refer to this as opposed to it's a washing machine. You have your gentle Annie at home, and I nicknamed this the rough uncle.
Right here, we've got the old trusty washing machine. As you can see, it's weird bits that I've always put together, and very quick.
Kiwi ingenuity. Yeah. Wait till you see the rinse cycle. Yeah.
Man, this is the wash cycle.
What?
And yeah, follow me over here. We've got the rinse cycle. Take the old clothes in, close up the old lid, and a bit of a shake.
Yeah. So it was the ingenuity. One of the interesting things as well, like even showering, we had big immersion heaters, which for those in the military may remember from days gone by, with white spirits, which just continuously had hot water, and you would have if you're going for a shower, you had a canvas bag, which is about the size of a bucket, and it had a wee shower head, and you would go and fill it up. Then you'd go into the shower tent, you'd clip it onto a rope, you'd haul the rope up, tie it off, and then you would push a wee lever to let the water, turn it off, lather yourself up, push the lever again to rinse yourself off. But it was really interesting because obviously there was no running water, no pressure or anything. So the flying missions that we would do, we had a flight we would do every day soon after called Kiwi Star, and there was the morning route which would go from Mogadishu down to Kismayo. Interesting thing about that, it actually, the equator is just pretty much runs between there. So there were some times, because you'd have US Marines down the back, and sometimes as a pilot you'd say, "Ladies and gentlemen, Captain speaking, we're just about to cross the equator, so can you please make sure that your seatbelts are firmly fastened?" And, "Oh, dang, okay, and they'd put the seatbelts, and then as you cross the equator, you just clip out the autopilot, you just pull back gently and push forward, and the aircraft would go like that. And 99% would think that's quite funny. Yeah. But there'd probably be one riding home to mum, "Dang, I didn't know the equator had a bump in the sky." But little bits of humour like that was good. And then the other part was Mogadishu up to Baidoa and to Ballydogle. So we would continually just be flying humanitarian aid or troops for security around there. Bardera also became quite a large contingent, so we did a lot of runs to and from Bardera. We also would go to Kenya, to Nairobi, and we also went up to Djibouti. So Kenya, we would go there a lot for getting supplies and also mail. So just some stuff about the flying missions. So some of the airfields, they were just pretty much a big strip of sand. This was Bardera International Airport, so no Coru Lounge, as you can see, but just the dust pretty much everywhere. So that would be pretty much where you would land. And over here, parked up, you can see the terrain, again, pretty rough, a bit of hard standing in this. And this is actually, these are clipped together bits of hard standing tarmac that the US would bring in. And you can see behind the aircraft there's the Cobra gunships. So these were the attack helicopters that they had many of flying around Somalia. They've got the gun out the back and rockets underneath, and the beautiful Huey as well behind them. But just the dust that we had, aircraft landing, so a Herc coming out of the dust there. Other aircraft there, this is I think an Antonov 32. These were on contracts, United Nations, doing similar sort of roles to us. And you can see a good example of the Andover there from the side, how it's crouched with the ramp down and the steps open. So the Andover, you could drive stuff, small vehicles if you wanted, straight up to the back, very much to help for loading as well. Other things and flying stuff that you don't get in New Zealand much, dust devils would sometimes occur. And I'm not sure if the next image is going to show, no, you just see it, but there's actually a whole lot of camels here. You can just see the heads. I don't know why I'd only loaded half of it, but it's the only time I've ever had to go around because a camel's been crossing the runway. Yeah. So the next is just actually a couple of short videos. One of our big missions was psychological operations, or PSYOPs, and it sounds a bit ooh, but what it actually was dropping leaflets. We dropped leaflets to basically to villages if the US Marines were going to be coming in to deliver humanitarian aid, or if they were going to be coming in to try and put on electricity or water. We would go out and we would drop leaflets a few days before to let them know you're going to have these people with weapons in uniform, but they are actually here coming in peace to help do humanitarian. And what I've actually got here is a few leaflets. So I'll just pass out one per row, so you can just have a squiz. These were we literally dropped tens of thousands of these. Yeah, cool. So so I'll play the video, and these little leaflets in thanks very much. In Somalia, Somalia on the back talked a little bit about what they're coming in, and then you'll see on the front it just has a nice picture of a US Marine in his gear with his rifle on, shaking the hands of a Somali. So this was just the start of the mission. So the aircraft's knelt at the moment. You can see the support strut there and the ramp so you could walk up. The chap in the green t-shirt was actually Australian exchange pilot Chris Brady, and he was the captain and I was the co for this flight. These are the bags of literally hundreds of thousands of leaflets that we would drop. Also just shows, this video then just goes on to show the Andover taxiing out. And just I included that in so you can get a bit of a sense of the amount of dust that would just be kicked up all the time, all over the place, that you couldn't really avoid. The hard standing there, you can see it's a bit like Lego, huge Lego mats that were clipped together to form the hard standing as opposed to laying asphalt. A few of them disappeared overnight when they were laying them because they were big piles. They were located in some of the loadmasters' tents on the floor, so they had to return them. So different Gulfstream aircraft, I think, just taxiing in, and we'll get to look at some of the other aircraft that were flying around as well. So the beautiful noise of the Andover engines, that constant hum, Yeah. And so you see, just pulling out just how much dust would just scatter everywhere. And it's one thing there, you used to, you just couldn't get rid of it. You constantly were cleaning your rifle, making sure it was clean, and you can almost, right now I can almost taste that dust that got into absolutely everything. Just lining up on the runway, getting ready for takeoff, and the loadmaster will shortly just close the ramp. And you'll see the ramp come up. Now, what we used to do, if we were going to be staying relatively low, we wouldn't put the bulkhead down just to aid in the cooling. So here's the ramp coming up. You'll see the clamshell doors then close up. So, but there's actually a bulkhead just above Ernie's head that would come down as well to seal if you wanted to pressurise. But if you're going unpressurised, you'd leave that. It just helped with the cooling aircraft because it was obviously incredibly hot. Next, we're actually going to see the PSYOPs in action. Now, one of the interesting things about this, you'll see that, and I'll just start playing it, the aircraft, it's overhead there, but the navigator will be working at a release point, because obviously the leaflets would flutter in the breeze. So you had to work out what the wind was doing and therefore allocate that. So you might be a few miles past before you dropped it. So the loadmaster then hand up to say it's within 30 seconds. He'll then go 5 seconds, and then go chop. And then the 5-move army operator will just throw them into the wind. So, and they hopefully would drift in the right course towards. We also had boxes of leaflets, so that was for a smaller village, but US Marines down the back, so this is a larger village, so boxes and tethered to the edge. And yes, both people on the ramp, they have their harness and are clipped into the floor of the aircraft, if you were wondering. Yeah. I remember the first time we did a PSYOPS, we actually, for the first few flights, we would fly around to check where the leaflets had drifted to see if we were right. But there was once, we did it one time and we couldn't see them, and they'd actually been caught in updraft and were above us. So we never, ever checked beforehand when we after that where they were. So this one here is a big box, and also you're wondering why they're wearing helmets. Well, watch what happens to the cardboard box after it's empty. And that was a really interesting part of the mission that we used to do. And obviously, being friendly Kiwis, you'd keep quite low when you were down, so that if anyone wanted to, any aggressors or something. But also, you'll see the odd wave at all. That the loadmasters would do to people there, but I always would wonder what someone on the road would think of this. What the heck is that thing? Not knowing it was such a beautiful Andover aircraft. And then the next bit of footage is just of closing up the ramp. Or actually, no, we've got another PSYOPs drop here. And next we move down to the nav station. And one thing on the nav station that I'll point out very quickly as I go past is the GPS, which is coming down, it's going to be that thing just there. They were fitted, they were the very first GPSs that pretty much came into New Zealand in 1993. And they were a game changer, not only for getting to Somalia, but also for travelling when we were around there. A lot of the airfields were, even the villages, there might only be a few huts, and to actually find them without a GPS, because the map quality wasn't great, would have been near impossible. So the GPS was a real game changer, and quite incredible. Now technology that each of us are carrying on our phones, with your Google Maps, being able to go anywhere. There, indicating on there, I did pause it, we were about 400 to 500 feet just on the way home. One of the other beautiful things about the Andover and most military aircraft is its ability to reverse. So this here is just the Andover swinging back in after the flight, and then you'll hear it go into idle, and then to go into reverse, you would take your hands off the throttle, and there's a lever behind the throttles that you would then pull up and pull backwards. It would change the pitch of the engine into reverse. You can hear it going there, and then it would increase the power on the engines so you could start moving backwards. And also, you didn't have a reversing camera. Your reversing camera was the voice of the loadmaster. So he would be saying tail left, tail right, tail left, tail left, tail right, 10 metres, steady, temp 5 metres, 3, 2, 1, and then just stop. So not really much more to say about that, but it was quite interesting. You always had to trust your loadmaster. Some were more trustworthy than others. And what you'll see now is the loadmaster just jumping off, and the ramp can, ramp's flat at the moment, the ramp can go like that, and then the whole aircraft can kneel down. So he's jumps down, taking the support strut, which is just sitting on the end there, and then he'll go around to the side and just kneel the aircraft and lower the ramp. Ernie wasn't the tallest of loadmasters, so you can see the aircraft just kneeling down there and the ramp lowering. And there goes the support strut. So that's just kind of some quite cool footage actually that we don't have a heck of a lot of actually the Andover operating in Somalia. The next short video, it's just a different aircraft. The noise was pretty much constant. There were aircraft movements the whole time. We started trying to use decibels to sleep, to put in our ears, but we found that would just push the sand in. So it was just one of those things you didn't really get used to it, but it was just the way it was. So it's a RNZAF, I think, just taxiing out there, and then a couple of Black Hawk helicopters. Coming. The next footage is just of a C5 Galaxy, and I don't know if I've seen as many C5 Galaxies in my life. There was pretty much in and out every single day, just bringing troops in and out of the airfield, and just massive, you know, just absolutely massive aircraft and incredibly noisy. So again, this is the data on there. This was shortly after we arrived, and that was when it was at its busiest, because it was the huge insertion of the thousands and thousands of troops to secure. Interesting, it zooms in a little bit, and you can see the chap with probably the best view in the house. I don't know if I would have necessarily done that, given the security environment, but hey. So this was, this is pretty much right outside camp. So, and this is, a night time. But you can't really get a sense for that noise. But if you've ever been to the airport to watch like the A380 coming in or taking off, yeah. This here is just a Cobra gunships, and again you can see the incredible amounts of dust that would just be kicking up and just floating through absolutely everything. I remember just watching, sometimes they would, when they would start up, they would start up and then they would disappear in the dust, and then they would appear out the top of the dust cloud. This here is a star lifter. And then the last bit of footage, it just shows the just the C-130 Hercules and a C-5 taking off, which hopefully you're finding interesting. It's not. I know it's not the Andover, but Hercules is still pretty cool. It's definitely a bit noisier in real life. So I guess some last things, R&R, rest and relaxation. We would get 3 days off a month, where we would go to either Nairobi or Mombasa, just to stay in a hotel and be able to make a phone call home, because there was no cell phones, there was no email that hadn't been invented. Neither of them had been invented back then. We had a satellite phone on camp for emergencies, but that was $25 US per minute to use, so we weren't able to use that. So the interesting thing was it'd get the old mail call, the mail coming from home, and I know our first mail took 4 or 5 weeks to actually arrive at camp. So we'd left on the 1st of January, and the last phone calls made home were in the Seychelles, and then it was 4 or so weeks before you had any contact at all from home, which was you just accepted it, and the mail call was just like in the movies, right? And you'd be there hoping there was something in the mailbag for you. And also one of the guys on our course, Greg Kai, he got his nickname because of his girlfriend's mail. Because read out, Greggy Wiggy Smiggy, have we got a Greg? So she had addressed it as pet name to him, so he was nicknamed Schmiggy from there. So yeah, it was interesting little things like that. And on R&R, when you would go, you'd have your 3 days off. You would have a 20-minute phone call home. And that the defence would pay for. Also, there was the beach at Mogadishu, which you were allowed to go to if we had time off, and that was just about a 5-minute trip, and it was all secured on the airfield. The US Marines actually built a beach tower and would watch the beach for surf lifesaving type things. 2 of our groundies took surfboards to Somalia, and I caught my first wave at the beach at Mogadishu, which is an interesting wee story potentially. And also tracer fire. At night time, it was like every night there was a mini fireworks display, because tracer, what tracer round is, I think it's about every 6th or 7th round has a little bit of, I think it's phosphorescence on the tip, so it lights up. So when they would be firing up or firing down, you'd see these light shows across the sky, and we were allowed 2 cans of beer a night. And you would sometimes sit there just, this is kind of interesting. Yeah, quite unique. Final thoughts, I guess, did we make a difference? Definitely when the task force went in, there was a definite, the aid was able to travel. We also would we had doctors with us that would go down to the port on a daily basis and do medical, and they would set up big medical tents so they could give medical aid just to the normal Somali community as well. But I kind of look back, it's kind of interesting, 31 years ago, what it was like when hair was a different colour. But I think it's one of those things in life, some fantastic memories. I think the thing that's what you do when you put the uniform on, you never know where you're going to be sent, but you do whatever the democratically elected government decides of the day. So hopefully you found some of that interesting. And now, lastly, questions. We had our reunion in April this year, so I love this photo. Here's me with Dave Hemi and Blubs Brian Haybiddle. 31 years between photos. Yeah, so we haven't changed a bit. Yeah. So thanks very much for listening. Now, happy to any questions you